Okay, here we are, everybody. Hey, welcome to Thursday night's Protect Our Strategy session. I will throw the names up here. This is the first one of the brand new year, 2022. So happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back. It's nice to have Dustin back, Brad back. Again, it's just super. I've just been looking forward to this. Kick these off here in 2022. We got every Thursday we're here live, and for the foreseeable future, we got a lot of great insights we're going to share with you guys this year. So I'm really looking forward to this. Tonight's no exception. We got a really cool conversation. Matter of fact, normally we kind of wing this. It's very organic, and I just kind of talk about whatever I feel like is top of mind. But I actually have some focus for the next 16 episodes. So the next 16 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's pretty impressive here, right? So tonight, we're going to jump right into it. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight, guys. We're going to break down, because this is something I say a lot, and I'm not sure a lot of people fully understand this. Hey, Mac, what's up, buddy? And congratulations to Mac. Had a little baby girl just before the holidays and over the holidays. Now you guys are back home, so everybody is happy and healthy. So fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And tonight, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about violence is a language. We're going to break down that statement, right? Because I say it all the time. We say it all the time. Violence is a language. But a lot of people don't understand what we mean when we say violence is a language. So I'm going to cut to the intro. We're going to hit that. And in 60 seconds, we're going to be back to discuss violence as a language. Hang with us. Many people understand that they can at any time become the target of a violent criminal assault. These same people know that they have a life, family, and property worth defending. Criminals understand that violence is its own language. Violence is not the sport of competition. Violence is not the art of fighting. Violence is about one thing: destruction. There are those who believe that violence, even in self-defense, is morally wrong. Then there are good people like you who know that defending yourself, family, and others, as well as your property, is not only a personal right, but a duty within a civilized society. Understand, violent assaults are won before they occur. People who learn strategy survive. People who do not will not. For those brave people who believe life is precious and worth defending, welcome to the Protect Our Strategy session. All right, guys, we are back. I'm just going to readjust some things on my screen here. Okay, so I said just before, we lost Dustin here. Did I kick him out somehow, or did he just fall off the face of the earth here?
Maybe he froze and just needed to jump off and jump back in.
Here he is. He's coming back in. Okay, so let me get Dustin back on here. Yep, there he is. Okay. Did you freeze up on us there, D?
Yeah, I thought I would just hang up and reconnect and see if it's better.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense. Okay. All right, so just before we cut to the intro, what I said is that we're going to talk about violence as a language, right? Now, it's a statement that we all make often. I talk to, when I'm explaining to what we do to people and stuff, one of the core concepts is that violence is a language. And I thought we'd take tonight's, Protect Our Strategy session to break that down so that people have a much clearer understanding of what we mean when we say this, okay? So I believe that when you talk about this, it's two separate parts to this conversation. And so the first part is just understanding when I say violence is a language, what I am talking about on a visceral level. Okay, so before I actually jump into giving my definition of it, which I know you guys share that, but I would love to hear what your guys' first thought is when you heard me share the topic with you, because you guys never know the topic beforehand. So when I say violence is a language, what's the first thing you guys think about?
It's not like one point, I guess. Just when you first say it, kind of immediately it resonates because yeah, of course it is, because
so break that down for me to one concept. What's the first thing that hits your mind?
I don't know. Like, I don't know how I can't narrow it to one. Like,
well, you're gonna have to. Brad, go. One thing. I'm buying you time. One thing. First thing. Violence is a language. Go.
One of the things that really hit me when I was thinking about this over the intro was, what are people talking about in terms of violence? Now, What I mean by that, not just the average Joe Blow, But what are the criminal intent? What are the criminal aspect? What are they talking about? Because what they're talking about is different than what the average everyday person is talking about. Now,
So
and when
what
I
the
say
criminals
talk
are
about,
talking about?
yeah, and I'm saying that as an analogy, not really actually having conversations about it, but
Yeah,
in terms of like the conversation is actually their intent, right?
gotcha.
So their
I get it.
intent to actually to to kill, to hurt, to damage, to destroy is different conversation than what other people are when they think of violence. Does that
Okay.
make sense? I know I kind of took a little bit of a loop.
No,
Getting
I
there,
get, I
but
get where you're coming from.
like,
You're talking about when you
yeah,
say the first thing that kind of popped in your mind is when you say violence is a language. You're thinking, okay, what is the conversation? What language are the criminals using?
yes, that's right.
Like if you're talking to criminals, what's their vocabulary? What's their which,
Yeah,
like you said, it's the intent, but it's like we have to listen to the language with which they're using
yeah,
when they talk about committing criminal acts, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect, great, and that's a great Dustin.
Yeah, I can expand on my idea better now. I think for me, when you first said it, for me, I think what hit me was like it's the depth of it. And so what I mean by that is when you talk about when you say violence is a language, it's like, well, yeah, there's a ton of depth to violence. I think a lot of people, especially people who obviously don't like study violence or even have spent any real time thinking about what violence is. I think a lot of people probably make the mistake of looking at violence as if it's almost like an emotion. No different, interchangeable of like someone might say, oh yeah, well, that guy's really angry, or oh yeah, that guy's violent. Like, do you know what I mean? Where they would
Yeah,
almost look at violence as an emotion similar to anger. Whereas
gotcha.
to me, it's like, no. It's like there's so much depth to what's actually happening in violence. And there is so many aspects of it that you can kind of break down and pull it apart, which is obviously what we're going to talk about tonight. But
Yeah.
so yeah, that was kind of my initial feeling was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of depth in that.
Yeah, for sure. Which 100% there is. Okay, good. I like that. I'm going to throw this up because Mac made a point, right? Mac said the language of violence is universal, and that's going to really fit in, especially as we unpack this conversation tonight. But that's a really that's worth just popping that up right now and talking about it because 100% the language of violence is a universally spoken language, meaning that, and I really like that because violence, whether it happens on Russian soil, if I go on vacation and I find myself in Russia facing violence, or I'm in Canada or I'm in it doesn't matter. I mean, universally, it's interpersonal human aggression, right? It's when one member of a species debases, dehumanizes another member of a species up to the point that they're willing to take their life. Okay, so violence and the language of violence being universal. I really, really like that. That's a really good comment to throw up there, Mac. And sorry, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, I just want to add to that same comment is I think a lot of people might, in some cases, overuse the word violence. Again, like whether it's anger
Yes.
or especially with aggression, which we've talked a lot about. But I think what most people would never do is fail to kind of appreciate true violence when they see it. Like if
Yes.
you showed someone a video of like true violence by our definition,
Yep.
you could pretty much ask anyone and be like, "Is that violent?" They're like, "Uh huh." Like you can't you can't
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
violence for what it is. Like you don't have to be trained to understand and know what violence is to recognize violence.
Yes.
Although you might mislabel other things as violence, but you wouldn't miss true violence.
Yeah. Well,
You
let's
never mistake it for anything else, right?
100%. And kind of what you're talking about too is like if we get to like something we call the predator scale, where it's like you have to have a system of measurement. And let's back it up to what you're talking about. Like, what is your definition of violence? Because people will see a hockey fight, right? Two professional athletes fighting in hockey, and they'll say, well, that's violence in a sport. And it's like, well, that's by our definition is not even close to violence. And I'm not saying that there has not been, you cannot have a violent act happen inside of a conventional sporting event, but it's not, they're not violent. That's just again your perception, right? Because everyone has their own unique perception. Was today cold outside or was today warm outside? Well, that's your perception. The fact is the temperature was X, right? But it's your perception of whether or not you found that to be cold or whether you found it to be warm. If you grew up in Jamaica, it was probably like you probably don't even have a word to describe how fucking cold it was outside. But if you grew up in the Antarctic, you're probably like, well, it's a pretty normal day. You get what I mean? So when it comes to violence, again, and we're talking about violent criminal assaults. We're talking about where you are being devoid of choice. We're talking about where one side has the intent to harm the other person, and that means like injure to up to and including death. Okay, so violence exists on one side of the scale there. Yeah, Brad?
I think that's the confusing point for a lot of people, like in terms of mislabeling, because like aggression gets mislabeled as violent,
Yeah.
and people get confused all the time when, because you said violent criminal intent, and that is, needs to be the focus of what what we're talking about, because it's so easy to mislabel something else as violence, and it truly isn't. So it's like that needs to be separated to really understand and focus on the language.
Well, see, yeah, but just bring it back to it, right? Because this is the thing, right? If we talk about violence as a language, I started off by saying that this conversation has to be broken down into two parts, right? And the first part is that people actually have to understand what we're talking about. Otherwise, you just have a straight up miscommunication. So let's literally talk about this like a language. Okay, so if I was talking about, let's just assume that most people watching this do not speak Russian. And if you do happen to speak Russian, then Italian. And if you happen to speak Italian, then Japanese. And if you happen to speak Japanese, then whatever. You get what I mean? So if we are all of a sudden in a situation where every person that is in a conversation speaks a different language that you do not understand. So if somebody's speaking Russian, I don't understand, I don't speak Russian, then guess what's going to happen when they're speaking a language, even if they're speaking that language directly towards me, I'm not going to understand them. And what happens when you don't have understanding? That to me is point number one. If there is a language you don't understand and there's an attempt to communicate. See, if I'm never in a situation where someone's speaking Russian to me, then it's never going to matter to me. Theoretically, I could go my entire life and never need Russian. Do you get what I mean? Never learn how to have to speak Russian, because it just doesn't matter to me. But if the second I'm in a situation where I have to speak Russian, then it matters to me all of a sudden. Okay, so violence is the same thing. So if somebody's speaking a language to me that I don't understand, then all of a sudden, guess what? I now am going to have a misunderstanding. There's going to be a miscommunication. And the only reason I'm using this analogy is because when I tell people, say, listen, violence is a language. I want people viscerally to stop and go, well, do I speak that language? Do I understand that language? And this is where what the points that have been made so far, there can be a misconception, because if you mislabel, so again, I think I speak fluent Russian. It's not fucking Russian. That's Latin. And you think it's Russian. Like, so you go to Russia with all this confidence going, nah, I totally speak the language. I've been studying for 5 years. Then you land and somebody speaks Russian. You're like, the fuck's the matter with these people? This is not Russian. And it's like, no, it fucking is Russian. Do you see where it's all going to get fucked up? Okay, so violence is a language. And so if you don't study criminality, if you don't study violence, or if you mislabel that and think that you are, miscommunication is going to happen. And when miscommunication happens, what is a ripple effect of miscommunication or misunderstanding? Well, people take actions, or things get done that are completely fucking wrong. And then it can spiral from there. Brad, you were going to jump in on that.
Yeah, just a real quick thing is you miss cues. You miss like an intent of something, or you completely don't understand it. Because if you don't understand the language, you're completely going to miss we'll say inflection, for an example, right?
Yes.
So you miss the inflection because you have no idea what they're talking about. And then when you're talking about violence, that inflection is catastrophic.
Yes, 100%. And I'm just going to pop up. We got a comment popped up here. So it's interesting description of violence as a language. Put it in this context, I'd see violence as a necessity under certain circumstances, i.e. attack, backed into a corner, and 100%. And this is exactly why we use this statement of a language and say violence is a language, because then right away it goes, then do I have a necessity to speak this language? And I mean, if you live in our society and you ever have heard the news or read a paper, whatever, it is a necessity. Now, here's the thing, and this is just a quick side tangent, but because I'm not really a big fan of everybody arguing statistically, you know what I mean? Like, how many assaults were there in the last 5 years to the previous 5 years? Is society getting more violent? Isn't it getting more violent? I think, for me, it comes down to this thing. One serial killer, if you look back over, I don't care, go to whatever time period you have, one serial killer that is known to be operating in an area can change the behavior of millions of people. Right? You know what I mean? Millions of people. Remember that sniper they had that was shooting people when they went to get gas? You know what I mean? And it turns out it was a guy in a trunk with a car and a younger kid, and they were doing this. It changed the behavior of millions of people. the Son of Sam killer, all these different things. I mean, millions and millions of people changed their behavior because of one serial killer operating in this massive area. And I just want to put this into context because hundreds of thousands of people this year, last year, all the previous years, will die from health related illness due to smoking, let's say. And yet it does very little to curb the behavior of society. You know what I mean? But one murderer, one serial killer. So if we turned around and said, listen, if there is a 1% chance of facing a violent criminal predator, not an argument, like, you know, you want to be able to defend that stuff, like, you know, it's a sliding scale, but we are talking about the language of violence. We're talking about murder. And it might not be from a serial killer, but it can be a businessman who's under the influence, gets fucking laid off work, his wife left him, all this shit's happening, and he fucking snaps. He's undiagnosed bipolar, schizophrenic, he's got mental health conditions, physical pain, chronic, and this guy snaps, and you're that person on the X, and driving home one day, he takes offense to something, gets out of his car at the light, pulls out a tire iron, opens your door, and starts trying to beat you to death, or your wife, or your kids, or whatever it is. Now, we're talking about violent criminal assault being devoid of choice. So it's important that we understand, okay, violence is a language. This creates a necessity within certain people. Because those people go, yeah, I live in a society where I better learn how to speak this language. So my first point was exactly that. We have to create this necessity. Do you believe that do you have any need in your life to learn to speak this language? And for the people that say, absolutely 110%. Perfect. Then the conversation moves to the second part. And the second part is, how do I start to learn this language? And this will tie in, and this is just one more layer to the problem of people mislabeling violence and aggression, right? Not understanding what the difference is. And that layer kind of is the ability for people to kind of understand where is that threshold shift, right? Where does that violence really start? Like, what are the assaults? What constitutes real world violence? And this is where most civilians have never been exposed to something like a use of force spectrum, we call it the predator profile, and we have a predator scale, where on that scale we teach people what are the indicators. Like, is there a system of measurement so that we can actually understand what is in front of us? Is this genuinely grievous bodily harm or death? Because that's what this is: choice versus no choice. Right, that's what this comes down to. And I'm gonna let you guys jump in on this a little bit, just on the two parts, what you think about it. We kind of have covered the first maybe, but like, create the necessity, and then once the necessity's there, where do you guys feel like that conversation has to begin to try to teach somebody a language that they've never spoken, right?
Yeah, I think it really just, never learning another actual language, but for me, it's like understanding that there's different dialects of things, and you want the one that is going to execute exactly what language you want, right? So it's like you can't like, again, I think I'm just kind of really stumbling on the fact of being mislabeled again, because it's like, you have to understand.
Okay, well, do this for a sec, Brad. Let's do this. If we've already got the concept down of that, people will mislabel. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand, okay, it's a language, and you have to figure out whether you have the necessity to learn to speak this language. So what you're talking about is like some of the first steps, because this is what it is. People don't get traction because people don't understand. Like we teach people to weaponize. What's that? Well, that's the physical and mental process for mastering the tool of violence. And people look at us like we're speaking another fucking language, because we are. Okay, so if that's the problem, this is the thing. How do you get traction with people right off the bat? Because the number one thing, let me say this to you guys, and you guys chew on this and throw it back out at me, right? But what if I said to you guys, and I know you've heard this lots, but there's a blind spot in our society. Because this adds to the whole thing about the language. There's a blind spot in our society, and one of the things that lives in the blind spot is the subject of violence. Right? So now you peel this back. You have somebody come to you and they say, well, listen, I heard you say this, and now what's the first step of this? What is the first thing that you would share with them or want them to know that starts to teach them the language of violence? And I'll throw you a hint out, because this is where we all start, and it's a big topic, but I use the word not. Violence is not the boom, 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 boom. There's two areas right there, and I'll let you guys fill in the blanks on that.
Not the sport of competition and not the art of fighting.
So break that down for people.
So I think to break it down and to have people understand like what they're actually dealing with is, well, let's talk about the sport of competition, right? So mixed martial arts, people look at that and people think that MMA is violent, but it's mislabeled. It's mislabeled aggression, right? So no different than the art of fighting. People look at that and they're like, oh, well, like that's violence. That's violence. This is how many times you hear people talk about that sort of thing where people are like, oh, it's barbaric. And it's like, well, no, it's either sport or, whatever it happens to be, but really shining a light on the differences of what true violence is compared to what society has deemed things to be violent, which it's not. It's just aggression.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Dustin, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Brad. I think based on what you asked, I think people have to make sure that where they're going to find their solution to dealing with violence, they have to make sure that their definition of violence matches the person that they're going to or the solution that they're seeking. And I guess that's how it ties into what you're talking about with the, violence is not the art of fighting or martial arts. It's not the sport of competition. So you can't go to a boxer and say, oh, I want to learn boxing, because we'll ask that boxer what his definition of violence is. And if he describes a boxing match, well, then you're in the wrong place, because that's not your definition of violence. If your definition of violence is a home invasion and you and your family being assaulted by 3 or 4 unknown assailants in the middle of the night, well, that's not exactly a boxing match. So you have to make sure that your definition of violence matches the person who's providing you a solution, or else you're going to have the wrong solution.
It's like going to a French teacher to learn Russian.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let me throw a few things out here with you. First, let me start with this. One of the first things that I do, right, we say violence is a language. I need people to understand the necessity. Then, because you got to know what you want, right?
Yeah.
The second thing about, if we're going to start trying to teach people what we mean, or say, listen, I'm going to teach you how to speak a brand new language. One of the first things that I'll often say to people is violence is not the sport of competition. It's not the art of fighting. The reason we do that is because those are the two most commonly spoken languages. Those are the two most commonly spoken languages in what industry? I'll let you guys jump in and answer that. Yeah, I want to hear, right? In martial arts, in self-defense and personal protection, sport competition and the art of fighting are the two most commonly spoken languages.
Yeah.
And this is the first point that if you're watching this or you see this, this is a point where we're going to divide the audience right now. That's not fucking violence. You're speaking the wrong fucking language. Okay, now I'm going to jump on the boxer analogy, right? Because you said, okay, now boxer, you know what I mean? If you ask a boxer what his definition of violence is, he might describe something similar to a boxing match. Right now, of course they're going to say, yeah, but it's on the street. So it's like, I'm out at the club. I'm out at the club hanging with my guys, and some other group of guys get in our face, start harassing our girls. So whatever scenario, whatever picture he paints leads to what? A fight. He goes, I didn't want to have to fight, but this guy wouldn't leave me alone. This guy kept egging me on. This guy kept talking trash about my girl. This guy, pushed my girl. This guy got up my face and went to grab me. This guy, put his hands up. This guy threw a punch at me. It turned into a fight. Did you remove yourself from the situation? Like, you know what I mean? Like, people, so a boxer, his perception will always lead to, well, yeah, I'm a boxer and that's a sport. But if I get into a fight, and the scenario the picture they paint will always be a fight. Why? Because it's the language they speak. So their paradigm, their perception, the colored lenses have to lead there. No surprise that a guy does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu And, well, yeah, but what happens if it's on the street? His scenario will lead to him taking somebody down. Like, it's going to lead to a fight because both of their arts work in the context of the fight. So that the scenario becomes a fight. And they say, well, that's violence. That's 99.9% of all fights are not violence. They were altercations that escalated into a fight. Meaning what? You had fucking choice. A guy's talking shit about my girl. Did you walk away? Fuck that shit. Why would I back down? Oh, you didn't walk away. You didn't remove yourself from that situation. Why? Because your ego, here it is. Status, display, profit, and damage limitation. The posturing starts up and it sucks people into the fight. Fighting is not violence. So I always start with those two things, right? So it's not the art, it's not a sport of competition, it's not the art of fighting. But here's the easiest way to sum that up. Context determines content. That's what I was just talking about. That whole fucking thing I just said is context determines content. The context of somebody challenging you to a fight is not violence. You have choice. 99.99% of the time you have choice. Someone at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 armed men break into your home. They're standing at the top of your fucking stairs when you're just getting out of bed because you heard a noise and they got fucking knives in their hands. And you got sleeping children 15 feet down the hall and a sound asleep spouse sitting behind you. And these people fucking chest puffs out, eyes tightened, lips pierced, hands raised up with a knife in it. And they lunge and, feet root into the fucking carpet. You have no fucking choice in that moment. And people say, oh, you're in it. Now you're in a fight. You're not in a fucking fight. You're in an attempted murder. There's individuals that are about to commit a fucking atrocity in your house. They were hoping to find you sound fucking asleep. Beat you, fucking gag you, tape you, maybe rape your wife or kids in front of people. At the end of it, fucking stab you both, put guns and put bullets through your fucking heads. You have no idea what the intent was. But just based off the stimulus you're reading, the context of that situation determines the content. Now, here's the thing that I want people to understand. Even if I paint that scenario, 3 a.m, armed intruders, guys with fucking butcher knives, guys that have done this before, people that have killed and murdered with criminal fucking intent, and all the other factors that lead someone to that type of situation, a boxer believes that he'll apply boxing to that situation. A jiu-jitsu fighter believes he'll apply jiu-jitsu to that situation. Now, can they or can't they? Will it work or won't it work? Oh, they can. There are individuals out there that can. There are guys that are so good that they could, boom, 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 light somebody up. They are 1 in a million that have those skill sets. That get to the level that are that good, that could apply that boxing or that could apply that jiu-jitsu against multiple people with knives. I'm not even going to argue whether they can or they can't. What we're saying is what? If you speak the language of violence and people have that type of criminal intent, that type of motive, that type of initiative, you need the strategies to learn how to fucking cheat in that. To try to face them down with a sport or a art of fighting that was developed and is practiced and is trained for one-on-one confines of all that shit, right? You need to have a predatory killer instinct. You need to understand how to stack that deck back. You need to have an equal or greater intent. And I'll say, you need to have an equal or greater criminal intent. Because you need to speak the language of violence. And this is the part where we always say, right? Violence, the tool of violence, whether it is used by good or bad people, used for self-defense or fucking murder, the tool works the same for both good and bad people. The tool's the same. That's all it is a tool. Self-defense and murder is determined after.
No different than a firearm, right? You put a firearm in a police officer's hand, or you put it in a violent criminal's hand, right? One is self-defense, one is murder.
Excellent analogy. Okay? This is like, just stop here for a second. Violence is a language, and there's a blind spot in our society. And there's really kind of two, right? Sex and violence. The two topics that good people don't talk about in decent conversation. You don't go to a fucking, your friend's house party on Christmas over the holidays and sitting there having some holiday cheer and start talking about sex. And you don't start talking about violence. Those are the two things where people are like socially retarded when it comes to that. Now, right away, most people, well, of course you don't do that. What type of person do that? Automatically, the brain goes to, it's going to be some grotesque, perverse conversation. You can have a conversation about sex and you can have a conversation about violence, and not any of it has to be grotesque or sensationalistic or anything fucking like that. See it for what it is, not worse than it is, but speak to the realities of it. Geez, why would a conversation about violence ever come up in our society? I can't imagine. Because everybody knows somebody that has been touched by violence. You know what I mean? Like everybody. And yet we don't want to talk about that shit. So to me, it's this, the first part is getting people to understand that violence is a language and it exists in our society. There's people out there that are fluent in this shit. Outliers of violence, the criminals. So there's a necessity to learn to speak the language. The second part is how do I start speaking the language? Because the two most popular languages that are being spoken are competitive sport and martial arts, the art of fighting. And both of those, although you can absolutely have people that can use those to defend themselves, 99% of the times they defend themselves, it was in a fight. If you break it down, it does not meet the criteria of criminal violent assaults, where you're devoid of choice, where there's imminent grievous bodily harm or death, where it's reasonable to presume that to perceive that that's the outcome, right? Does that track? So the context determines the content. So I want you guys to throw something in there that I'm going to go over here and look at a couple comments because Mac's been throwing up a few comments here.
Yeah, I got something just when you talked about, because I know that we have the would you questions. Would you do this if? Because like when you talk about using violence as a tool, and that's either for, could be murder or self-defense, and that's determined afterwards, I think that statement alone is going to be hard for some to digest. Just because when they think about the paradigms that we've received from society, is that when you talk about violence and people are like, well, I can't do that because I'm not that type of person.
Yep.
I would never do that because it takes this type of criminal or this type of asshole or this type of whatever it happens to be, and they're like, I'm not that person. So, we've been conditioned in our society, and many societies, it's just that it's like, well, you can't use violence. You can't hit. You got to use your words. All this stuff, and then that's why we have the would you questions. Like I don't know if we want to get into that, but you know what I mean. So so people could be able to identify the fact that they could use violence as a tool, just like a criminal can, but for the good of protecting yourself, your family, your loved one.
Yep. Now, just to expand on your thing, one of these, look at this, because that is a really, really good point, that if somebody's watching this right now, and maybe what we need to do is we need to be more descriptive. And just in the sense that, let's just finish the analogy of what we're talking about, right? Let's go back to the scenario. 3 o'clock in the morning, armed intruders breaching the doorway to your room, one in front, one behind, the other guy's still in the hallway. Your kids are 15 feet down the hallway. If he decides to go towards your kid's room armed with a knife, we're talking about fractions of seconds here, right? I can jump out of bed, throw my hands up, start working some boxing combinations, hope I don't get fucking stabbed, hope that I can knock this guy out fast enough or whatever to get through him, and then engage the next guy with his knife and knock him the fuck out. Possible? Sure. Probable? Not for most people.
Yeah, a lot of things have to go right.
A lot of things got to go fucking right. In the chaos of that, and the environment, and the non-footing, your hands aren't wrapped, like you're woken up from a dead sleep. Now, what I'm saying is, though, you wake up from a dead sleep, but you've been weaponized. Why? Meaning what? Meaning that you've mastered the tool of violence. Meaning what? What's beside the bed? When you went to bed, there's a routine when I shut things down, because in my mind, I've run the scenario thousands of times. What happens if somebody breaches into my home? Now, they breach into the home because they want to steal shit and run away. I don't give a fuck. Take your shit. But they breach into home and now they're upstairs and now there's a threat. Where are the choke points? How do I, where do my fallback spaces go? Where have I, what do I have beside the bed? Do I have a tack light? Do I have a tactical knife? What do I have up there? You know what I mean? You jump up off that bed, but understanding that a pillow in a pillowcase. I have certain types of clothing and something sitting next to the bed. These things will block they make it, there's a barrier. There's a way to stop somebody from just being able to stab or slash me with 100%, nothing but air and opportunity. I don't just throw my fucking hands up. Instantaneously, systems come into play. I don't even have to see the fact that he's got a knife. If I got an intruder in my room, the survivable value lies in assuming that they are armed.
Yep.
And so I'm saying there's strategies that start getting put into play. A strategy for how you start changing the deck, stacking the deck in your favor. Then there's tactics, then there's tools. The level of viciousness, the fact that I see two and there's one in front and one back and my kids are down that hallway, I need the suddenness of violence. How do you take somebody out of commission efficiently? What tools, what skills do you have that injure the human body as fast as you possibly can? I don't want to try to punch a guy and knock him out because too much shit has to go right for that to happen. I'm not trying to punch him and break his jaw or do something and cause enough pain. I'm not trying to hurt him. If I try to hurt him, he can endure the pain. He's on fucking drugs. He's got a mental break going, whatever it is. I need to injure the human body in a violent manner so that the human body is now broken. The human body is either he's completely incapacitated or now he is seriously diminished, and that allows me to get to the next guy and I have to injure that guy. And this is what Brad's talking about. A lot of people, and I'm not sharing a lot of the ways that we would do that. How do you injure the human body that quickly? Well, study anatomy, study automobile accidents, study violent criminal assaults. Watch what happens, because the human body, no matter how big, no matter how strong, there's a number of ways that the human body, when it receives an injury on a certain part of the body done in a certain manner, it doesn't matter, the result's the same. But the idea is that now people are like, I don't think I could do this. Then we got to come to the whole thing, and I want you guys to fill in the blanks on this. What if I tell you guys love and capacity? What does that mean to you guys? First thing, take the first thing. Love.
Yeah, love.
How does love filter into this conversation?
Because it's your capacity for love of the things behind you that allow you to use violence as a tool to deal with whatever it is in front of you. So in your example, someone's breaking into your room. Well, it's because you have so much love for your wife, for your kids, that you're willing to do whatever you have to protect them.
Yes.
So that violent act that you need to commit is driven by love. It's not driven by hate. It's not that you hate that person coming in. It's not that it has nothing to do with them. It's irrelevant how you feel about them.
Yep.
It's purely driven by the love for your family and yourself, your own life too.
Yep.
And that's what drives it.
Yep. Now, let me take this. I grab your head. Anyone listening to this right now, I grab your head, we're standing in a fucking pool, and I shove your head underwater and I hold it there. And I just hold it there. How many people listening to this right now, when I shove your head and I hold your head underwater, just go limp?
Nobody.
Just go limp. He'll let me up. He'll let me up. Then you start that all of a sudden, that panic, like, holy fuck, I can't breathe. Relax. He's going to let you up. How many people just go, well, fuck it. Open their mouths and just fill their lungs full of water and drown themselves. Go, well, I'm going to make it quick. How many people start fucking freaking out and fighting like their life depends on it, because it fucking does, fighting for air? What rule? What rule? Don't put your hand, don't push off on the ground. Don't use your legs. Don't kick the person. Don't hit the person. Use your words. Let's negotiate. The point I'm getting at is that when your head is shoved underwater, there is an innate survival mechanism inside. You're going to have a primal flinch response where your body's going to fucking fight like crazy. It's going to go out. Some people will go into panic mode, but it's going to start mobilizing some resources because it's screaming, you need fucking air. It's sending out all the warning signals. Now imagine that being weaponized. Imagine that being channeled where you were taught strategy, tactics, and tools so that you could efficiently get that hand off the back of your head and get up and take in some air. And maybe, just maybe, you don't have to fucking panic at all. You can just work your way out of that. Despite somebody trying to kill you, someone trying to drown you, you can work your way out of that in a more calm, context determines content, in a more calm manner. Now, you're hardwired for that, right? That's just hardwired in most people. Then the other side is what you're saying is the love. My spouse is right here, my kids are right there. What do I care for more in this world? They can take whatever they want. They can burn the fucking house to the ground. They can drain the bank account. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. But we have this protect ours. People that have this in them have a profound love for not just themselves, their family, but for other innocent, good people. And you combine these two things. Now, just so people have a clarity, because, we ask people a series of questions, right? But if you came home, unlocked your door, and you saw 3 armed individuals, right, standing there holding a butcher knife, and one guy's got your wife or your spouse by the hair or by the fucking throat, and they're kicking and punching them and throwing them against walls and slamming them over fucking furniture and ripping and pulling and tearing at their fucking clothes, and this is what you see the second you walk in your door, and your brain's going, where the fuck are my kids? What's happened? How long have they been here? What's going on? It's clear to see what's going on here. Do you grab that heavy statue sitting by the front entrance door? Do you grab that heavy statue? As you're running in there and you happen to run through the kitchen, do you grab that little paring knife out of the butcher block? Do you pick up something and smash one of these guys over the head? Do you slash at one of these guys? Do you pick up a weapon to stop armed, violent criminals from sexually assaulting or murdering your spouse? Do you do that, yes or no? There's people that will not, under any circumstances, say yes. They'll want to go into negotiation mode. Well, I'd call the police. Now you don't have a cell phone. I'd use my landline. Now there's no landline. There's no police anyhow. They can't make it. They're never going to be there in time. I would yell stop and start taking descriptions of them. I would run to the neighbors and get help. Now there's not enough time. There's people that just want to negotiate. And then there's people that would go, fuck yes. I'm not saying I want to do that shit, but if that's what I came home and witnessed and there was a heavy statue there, I grab that and I smash one of them over the head. I run behind the other one, I grab a handful of testicles and rupture those fucking things. There is nothing that is off limits. Nothing. All my daughter's pens and school books are there. I grab those pens and pencils and I stab them in the frickin' neck. You know what I mean? If you can answer yes to that, you have the capacity for violence. When many people in society, everyone has the capacity, but many people have been conditioned out of that because they don't speak the violence of language, the language of violence. But if you can say yes to doing that, and even though it's a horrific thing, and if you think about that, it's deep stuff. But what motivated that? Hatred? Were you angry at seeing these guys? Oh, I'm sure you'll say yes, especially after the fact. It's not anger. It's a deep, deep, passionate fucking love to see the person you love and you care about, that you have committed to protect. Seeing that person being harmed, seeing that person being debased and dehumanized, seeing that person be exposed to atrocities. That deep love is what fuels that. Just like if I held your head underwater, your love for life. We're hardwired to survive. We're not hardwired for happiness. We're hardwired to survive. Happiness, you got to fucking work at that shit. But you put your hand on a hot stove, you'll fucking pull that shit away. You go stand up by a cliff and you go to look over, your head says, I want to see. Your ass says, fucking say, be careful, dude. We're hardwired to want to live. This is where, again, everything we're talking about right now is all what? What you need to start learning the new language. Many people have never been told this stuff. They don't know that they're hardwired to say, you know from birth you're hardwired with an innate survival system, the sympathetic nervous system, hardwired for survival? So yeah, I knew that. Well, do you know that if you're hardwired for survival and you can accept that, you know that and understand that and can acknowledge it, you're also hardwired for violence? I hold your head underwater, you're going to fight? Yeah, but you know what's funny in our society? Grab somebody by the throat, pin them on the ground, pick up a knife, and start stabbing them, and many will go submissive. they won't fight the same way because we have a blind spot. We don't speak the language of violence. We've been sheltered from violence. And that's a great thing in many aspects of our society. We don't want to live in this horrific violent society, but we do live in a society that has violence in it. And I think that's a difference that a lot of people don't get. I'm just going to throw up a comment here because Mac's been pumping them out, which is really, really great. To bridge off what Brad is saying, when you discuss violence, people want to say you're being sensationalistic. Yes, a lot of people do that. Or that you shouldn't be worried about being a victim of violence because they think it's statistically rare, or so why bother? 100%. But that is like saying being in a car accident is rare, so if you do the speed limit, why bother wearing a seatbelt? 100%. 100%. There's so many different analogies. And Mac, you also threw this one up about the firearms, which was I think Dustin mentioned it, but no different than someone who trains the firearms, picturing every violent scenario as a firefight. Absolutely. Right? So those are really, really great comments. I appreciate those. But yeah, this is obviously in our time frame just the tip of the iceberg in this conversation. But if we learned anything from this, and I'm not saying we're done yet, I think we can make a few more points before we wrap it up. But the first bridge to cross is, do you even believe there's a necessity to learn to speak the language of violence? And I love it because if you say yes, you have to acknowledge that you have to acknowledge that violence exists, that there are people in this world, and if you give them an opportunity, they will and can hurt you. And you have to acknowledge the necessity to want to speak it, but to learn that language. But at the same time, you're acknowledging that you need to take ownership for your responsibility to become your own protector. Those things all are happening simultaneously when you just acknowledge that violence is a language. And it's a different fucking language than what, we've been taught. And that what is commonplace in our society. Then the second part, again, is how do we speak it? Context determines the content. And really starting to create a new definition of what violent criminals are capable of. And yeah, we are talking about the rare, extreme circumstances. That's the ammunition that many people try to use against me or against us as a company. Right? Mac talked about it. People just think you're being sensationalistic. People are like, oh, you're throwing these worst case scenarios out there. That's not that common and all this shit. 100%, absolutely. Until you're the person facing that extreme violence. Till you're the person with 3 people pinning you fucking to the ground, bottling you in the fucking head. And then 8 other people start curb stomping you and kicking you and beating you. That happened to me. I must be I should go buy a lottery ticket. I must be some rare person. You get what I mean? It doesn't matter how rare it might be. It happens. And this again is why for me, it's like I got so passionate about, nobody had taught me to speak the language of violence. And yet I had earned a black belt in martial arts and I had done the combative sport. I was a sparring partner for 2 guys professionally ranked, professional fighters, done it, training with them, sparred with them. And the second that I found myself facing violence, it was a language that I didn't speak. I didn't understand. I had nothing, and it, of course, did not work out in my favor. Okay, I'm going to throw another great comment here. I think there's a question of whether or not a person would experience a fight, flight, or freeze response under threat. 100%. Could a person get conditioned to a fight response? Yes. Or is that something that comes more naturally to some more than others? Yeah, no. Beautiful question. Matter of fact, I said at the beginning of our webcast here that over the next 16 episodes, I'm going to actually build. The next week's episode is going to build off this. We're going to come to this. I'm going to answer this a little bit right now, but we're going to go even deeper in one of our future episodes. But talking about the fight, flight response, I'll just very quickly, and you guys can jump in on this and fill in the blanks, but the fight, flight, or freeze is what most people understand the dichotomy to be. When really it's the fight, flight, posture, or submit. That's the full dichotomy. When you say fight, flight, or freeze, most times what that would really mean is that somebody that is untrained, fight, flight, or freeze is going to grossly overreact, grossly underreact, or they're going to freeze. Meaning, we lose control of our sympathetic nervous system. That is the hardwired system that operates our survival mechanisms within the body. So if all of a sudden I find myself in conflict, now this is where everybody boils at a different temperature. Somebody could just step in front of a person and go, "Hey, asshole," and that person is like, their survival instincts turn on, and they're like, "Oh, holy shit," because they've never had any exposure to confrontation. So the water is warm, but to them it feels scalding hot. Their sympathetic nervous system starts remobilizing all the body's resources, and they start experiencing all the things that will allow them to survive. But it starts to cascade out of control because they've never used the system, right? They go to what we call a condition black. So they grossly overreact. And all of a sudden they're picking up a brick and trying to hit this guy in the head. Oh yeah, you're going to have some troubles. You're going to have some legal problems here. You're grossly overreacting because your survival system got out of control. But there's so many people too that they feel it, but they benefit of the doubt themselves to death. This time it's someone, motherfucker, this hand that goes under a sweater. They show them a gun or they got a knife in there. Look, give me your fucking, and you can, all the intent is saying, this guy's not just going to rob you, this guy's going to kill you. And they're like, it's going to be okay. Hey man, Jake, whatever you want. I have no problems with you. And they're feeling all this stuff, but they're grossly underreacting. Or they simply freeze. They say nothing. They do nothing. Now, their body's not literally frozen. They're having a cognitive disconnect. It's just all happening so fast because their system is out of control. So this fight, flight, freeze is untrained, unweaponized. When you start to weaponize part of the process, which is why we do these, it is not just physical shit. Like, here's how you elbow, here's how you headbutt, here's how you use a knife. You have to actually get into the physiology and the psychology. And so when we're talking about today, but violence is language, the psychology, the perception, you have to start to understand the physiology of violence. How does your body respond to violence? And then your training has to actually activate that system and teach you control. We call it tactical arousal control techniques. We call it the inner control box. Learning how to regulate thoughts like, psychology, emotions, physiology, as well as the physical. It has to be an integrated system. I'll let you guys jump in on some of that because, again, we're going to have a future episode where we're going to go super deep into that. But that was a great, great question. I appreciate that a ton. Hopefully that helped answer it a little bit. And predisposition. Sorry, does it come naturally to other people? Yeah, there's people that have a predisposition. Guy grew up in Compton. I met a guy, he was Iranian, and he had to sneak out of the country. This is down in California when I was training, and he had to sneak out, and he got caught, and he was tortured, and he went back in 5 or 6 times, went back over the mountains, walked over the mountains to free his family, the guy's story is amazing. And this guy's a little 5'2" Iranian guy, one of the toughest, this guy was unbelievably weaponized, but he started from a very different point than I did, because of his predisposition, because of the cultural upbringing, the environment that he grew up in. He had to learn through necessity how to regulate his physiology, how to regulate his survival mechanisms. I grew up in, Canada. I grew up in loving home, and I think I got in a fist fight in grade 6. You know what I mean? And then I had some hockey scuffles until I was violently assaulted. Then I was into martial arts because of martial art movies. This guy was learning how to protect himself because people were trying to kill him and his family. I was learning martial arts because I thought Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee were some serious badass dudes. The context determines the content. But once I was violently assaulted, I had to find different people. I had to find people like this individual, like my mentors. That's why that guy was there. Because my instructors, my mentors understood the language of violence. And so people that understood it came to people that were proficient in the language. This beautifully ties in. Sorry, guys, I took up a lot of talk time with that. You guys are sitting there going there's one of Greg's rants. Their big thing is telling me blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So now you guys add something to that. What did you guys take away from that?
Oh, well, actually, I have a slightly different comment. You just said it. We said it earlier tonight, and I just want to kind of highlight it. It's just that whole context determines content concept. And then, that's essentially what I was driving at earlier when I started to talk about when somebody wants to to weaponize or to learn to start to speak the language of violence. Well, who are you going to? What's their definition of violence, right? Does it match your definition of violence? Yeah. And same thing. It's kind of like, that's what I was getting at, is like, well, what's the context? What's your context of violence?
Yes.
And then you need to seek out someone who has the same context of violence.
Yeah.
And I hope that anybody watching this or that will watch the replays, I hope people get and understand that, like, even tonight's conversation was so much about developing the context of what violence is.
Yes.
And if you look at how much time we spend like talking about it, studying it, and like you said, this is just the tip of the iceberg of one concept.
Yeah.
But the amount of time we put into this, learning the psychology and stuff. I mean, I look at my Instagram feed and I get, different people popping up and they're showing Wing Chun sequence, or another guy pops up and he's teaching pure self-defense against a firearm.
No.
But every time it's them just showing a series of moves.
Yeah.
It's here's a technique, here's a tool. That's it. That's all they ever talk about.
Yeah.
And we're so the opposite of that. And I just hope people get how critical that is when it actually comes to weaponizing and actually learning to potentially save your own life or someone you love. It's like, I don't know, just the context is just so critical. And I hope people feel that and get it and understand why we talk like this versus just coming on here and saying, oh yeah, someone breaks in, do this, do that, do this move, do that, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, everybody focuses on just content. They don't set up the context, and the content is nothing more than a move. Like this is why we go deep. The people that watch this are invested in learning a language of violence. They have deeper. It's everything you just said, and that's why we do this. We demand you have to geek out on this shit. You have to. And Brad, I know you got some things to say. I'll let you jump in on that, but you got. This is for the people that really want to go deep and geek out with us, because that's who we are, and that's the way you have to train to learn the language, right?
I think for just some thoughts that are kind of in my head right now is just the value of having these conversations. Like even I look back at my journey and it's like, how many times did we have conversations about violence just to shift a perception in myself, in other people? And those aren't conversations that we've had once, because every time you have that conversation, like, you just go deeper and deeper and deeper and have a better understanding and draw better parallels to your life and kind of everything around you. So, I'm just was thinking about like this conversation for people could be the very beginning of a conversation of something that, it's fucking taboo to have in society, talking like what you said. You don't talk about violence, you don't talk about sex. It's like, no, fuck that. We need to talk about violence because there's look around you. There's violence out there, and we need to not only just be the three of us speaking the language. We need hundreds of thousands, millions of people being able to speak that language because of love.
Yeah.
And
100%.
that is like, I'm just sitting here kind of like, I was listening to your guys' stuff and I was like, like, this is so awesome to share these conversations. I just think that, having more of these conversations and just spreading that message is just to be a part of that and helping people understand that language. It's awesome. It's where I was when you asked the question.
So I love it, man. And what you said, like, I couldn't have said it any better. I love it. And I just want to add one point, right? Because it's everybody understands this to be true, what I'm going to share with you. Now, we have kids as young as 8 and 9 years old that are choosing suicide because of bullying. And even bullying due to cyberbullying, which I'm not saying it's like cyberbullying is nothing. I'm saying it's like it's everywhere. It's 24 hours a day. People have access to people, and you got young kids, kids that young. Why are they choosing suicide due to bullying? It's because we don't talk about violence. We don't talk about, and you could say, well, bullying's not necessarily violence. Let's step back for a second and take an overview of this. We don't even have and teach our kids the most valuable things in our society. We don't even teach them how to handle low-level interpersonal human aggression. It is mentally, emotionally, physiologically, spiritually destroying and it's toxic, corrosive, and aseptic when another member of your species debases and dehumanizes you, especially in front of your peers. So it's not surprising that human beings that are bullied, that are, and again, I'm saying it's like people are being tormented and bullied and they turn to suicide. You know what I mean? Something that seems like perception-wise is so low level, but it's not low level because we've got no skill sets, no training, no conversations, honest, frank conversations to help them. For people to understand their sympathetic, their physiology activates. Imagine going to school. Cops burn out. Cops suffer adrenal fatigue and they suffer PTSD and stuff from going to work every single day, even if they don't face a super serious incident. Every single day they go to work and their sympathetic nervous system is activated for an 8-hour shift, a 10-hour shift, a 12-hour shift, being on high alert, ready in that survival mode, ready to face confrontation. And then they come home and then they have the parasympathetic back. And then they go back the next day and their physiology gets all fucked up. And then that screws the mental, and then they start having physical ramifications. The next thing you know, you got people suffering. These are adults. And yet we got kids going to school every single day that are terrified. They come home, they're terrified. They open up their phone, they're terrified. They turn on their computer, they're terrified. Why? Because of the same interpersonal human aggression. And yet we have no tools. People are not teaching mental and emotional as well as the physical armor to protect against that shit. But you can't go into a construction site anywhere in North America for the most part and not have on your PPE. But we can send our kids to school, we can go off to our workplaces, we can go out and live our lives, and we can deal with interpersonal aggression from the entire scale of trigger through escalation all the way up to fucking crisis and violent criminals. And yet don't talk about it, don't teach it. Let's give no PPE, let's give no mental, emotional, physiological, and physical skills for people to survive. This is why we have to understand violence is a language. It's a separate thing. And this is why we have to weaponize. This is why our whole entire movement is to weaponize people. Right? Master the tool of violence, the physical and mental process for mastering the tool of violence to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, your property, as well as others from a violent criminal assault. And that's just what you achieve on the physical safety, confidence, and certainty side. The transformation that happens when you engage in this process is you become a bulletproof, resilient human being. Mm-hmm. Because you're learning to thrive in crisis, not just survive, but thrive in crisis, which means what? When you're in crisis and your world's burning, you find your way. You don't turn to suicide. You stay out of depression. You stay positive. You stay offensive in your mind. Like all of the things we could just go on and on and on. But that's weaponized. I mean, that's why we all do this. I remember my instructor used to always say to me, he goes, if this was just about being able to beat somebody up or being able to just protect yourself from a fight, he goes, I'd have been done this shit by year 3. Because there's always someone tougher and there's going to be a lot of people that aren't. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, this is not what this is about. There's a lifestyle to this that touches every aspect of our lives, right? So, all right, anyone, closing thoughts? We'll wrap it up here, guys. I guess we kind of just did it, but anybody?
I'll go with Mac's earlier comment of, what he said.
Yeah, sorry, guys. I got on a tirade on that a little bit. But...
that's the beauty of this.
Yeah. Well, you know what? My final thing is just this, and I kind of said it right, but I appreciate you guys, not only for you guys have been with me and part of this process and not just learning it, but of course, continuously learning it as we all are. There is no end to this, but sharing it with other people. So I appreciate your time in having these conversations because I can sit here and rant and rave, but then I look more like a lunatic than I already do at times. But it's when, people need to see, and Brad, I think you said this, there's more, it's not just me. There's a tribe of us that think this way, that live this way, that are having these conversations. And this is it. This webcast and everything we do, everyone always tells me in marketing, your videos are too long. They got to be. I don't want people that want the short 60-second, show me a cool gun disarm or what kind of, I hate that shit. I don't want people that want to learn self-defense. I don't want those people.
We're getting past the fact, or we're letting people know it's okay to talk about this.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong. It's fucking healthy. and like that's what we're doing. Like,
Well, and there's people that, and
just-
it's not only nothing wrong with it and it's healthy, it's a fucking necessity.
yeah,
We want people
okay.
that want to weaponize. We want people that want to go, I want to master the goddamn tool of violence because I'm done being afraid. And not that you ever made me like, oh, I'm afraid to walk on the street, but I'm done. I'm done with the criminals having the advantage. I'm done thinking somebody's coming to save me or putting all my faith and responsibility that a system's going to. You have to rise regardless in this shit. And it is your right to life, liberty, freedom, and security and to be able to defend that life. And this is it. Like, you got to be able to go deep. You got to be willing to geek out, go deep. And the fun thing is with this whole thing is that the process is so expedient. It doesn't end. But you study the language, you learn the language, and you grow and you just keep becoming fluent. And there's just always layers to this. And, you know, that's one of the things I love about this. From where I was to where I am is amazing, and I'm super grateful. But I can see a clear path literally to the day that I die. I do not have to stop this journey and this process. And a massive part of it is contribution and passing this knowledge on and bringing more people into the tribe. And I love that there's no hierarchy. Every member of this tribe is equal. There's no belts. There's, like, you know what I mean? It's equal because we're all people. Two things, right? Every single one of us is going to have two dates. The day we're born and the day we die. Those will be on our tombstone. What happens in between is just what happens in between. Is what we make of it. But at the end of the day, that's what puts us all in the same boat. Doesn't matter what you do in between those two dates. We each get two dates, right? So I don't know. I love it. So I deeply appreciate you guys. Appreciate the conversation tonight. Great way to kick off 2022. Every Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. live here on Facebook. We will be here. Please. The comments tonight were amazing. I want to thank each and every person who joined in, watched, commented, liked, shared. This is how we move this forward. We have to have, it's people that think the same going, hey, I know somebody that is going to like this and shares it with that person and expands and exposes what our mission is to weaponize people. This is what we're looking for. It's good people fueled by love that want to protect what they love. Right, so that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. For me, Dustin, Brad, we will be back next Thursday. Please, I don't have anything to pop up. I will next time. But if you're looking for more information on this, check out Awaken the Protect R. Awaken the Protect with an R at the end of it, .ca. That is our website. I have a ton. We call it the free line. We have a ton of free courses on there. One of which is the education of a weaponized man. There is a free workshop course you can take. And also some other exciting news. I don't have my file up for you. It just got published today on Kindle as an ebook. So if you want to jump on Kindle, you can look up The Education of a Weaponized Man, and it will pop up on Kindle. And it's only 99 cents. But you can go to my website, sign up to take the workshop where I teach it kind of live, recorded live, and you can sign up there for free. So either way, that is it, everybody. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate your time. Stay safe, stay weaponized, and we will chat again soon, everybody. Take care.